Welcome to this explainer. We're going to dive right into a seriously fascinating artistic journey today. It's all about how completely shifting your perspective can just totally transform your visual storytelling. We'll be tracking this amazing creative evolution from a moody style known as urban Gothic into something entirely different, a concept called Cathedral. Honestly, it's a masterclass in how your environment, spatial awareness, and lighting don't just add to the emotion, they literally dictate it. Let's get into it. So let's challenge a fundamental assumption right out of the gate. Normally, we think of a story as just a sequence of events, right? Like this happens and then that happens. But this journey proves something pretty radical. Storytelling can begin entirely with atmosphere, way before any plot kicks in. As a visual creator, you can establish this whole emotional universe before a single action is even taken. How cool is that?
All right, Section 1, the urban Gothic atmosphere. When this artist first started out on this journey, their aesthetic was heavily defined by, well, urban alienation and a lot of emotional distance. And the goal here wasn't just to, photograph a model leaning against a cool concrete wall. The intent was way deeper. They wanted to force raw emotion and stark architecture to just collide. All that repetition and concrete geometry, it turns the city into an active stage rather than just some passive backdrop. Those harsh lines, the poured concrete, the sheer, imposing scale of the buildings, they aren't just sitting there. They are actively participating in the scene.
Just take a look at the cool blue-gray grading here and that heavily lowered saturation. By introducing this environmental haze and leaving a vast amount of negative space, you instantly get this sense of quiet unease. It creeps right in. It's honestly less about what the subject is wearing or doing, and entirely about the deep isolation they're experiencing within that vast concrete space. This perfectly captures that urban Gothic signature. It shows exactly how using specific visual techniques crafts emotional spatial storytelling that goes way beyond your standard fashion photography.
And this brings us to a golden rule for absolutely any visual creator. Every single choice you make in the editing room has got to drive the story forward. Color grading is narrative, guys. It's not just decoration. Those blue-gray tones, they aren't just a trendy aesthetic filter. They're literally whispering to the viewer, telling them to feel cold, detached, and completely isolated.
Moving right along to Section 2, Environment as the Character. So, as this project evolved organically over time, we see this massive shift in visual focus. Basically, by shrinking the human element down within the frame, the surrounding space is suddenly forced to become the main character. You kind of stop focusing so much on the person, and you start feeling the overwhelming, heavy presence of the architecture that's encasing them. It's a really powerful swap.
By leaning so heavily on these structural elements, the artist started directing the audience's feelings purely through spatial composition. Repetition, geometry, scale, they take over the entire storytelling process. And actually, this is a known psychological phenomenon. Things like massive, brutalist concrete pillars or infinite, repetitive dark hallways naturally trigger feelings of insignificance and intimidation in us. The environment is doing all the heavy lifting to shape how you respond.
But all of this builds to a massive emotional revelation in the artist's creative process. It begs the question, what happens when you look at the exact same physical space through a completely different lens? Like, can that cold concrete and harsh geometry be coaxed into speaking an entirely different language? Does the story always have to remain the same?
Which brings us to Section 3, Discovering the Cathedral.
Okay, so we arrive at a major turning point here. Through the simple act of really observing, the exact same architectural environment suddenly shifted in meaning. Corridors, windows, striking shafts of light that previously felt super cold and abandoned, suddenly they began to feel increasingly sacred. The artist was looking at the exact same raw locations, but their internal narrative was just organically shifting.
Visualizing this dichotomy is absolutely crucial to understanding the process. You can see exactly how the visual language transitioned here. The old urban Gothic themes, the darkness, the decay, the tension, they're totally stripped away. And in their place, those exact same spatial elements are reinterpreted into this cathedral mindset, radiating contemplation, stillness, and just a deep sense of reflection.
I love this insight because it reminds us that sometimes you just have to step back and let the art speak to you to find your true narrative. Like the quote says, themes often emerge through observation rather than planning. The artist didn't sit down on day one and meticulously plan to build a spiritual cathedral out of a concrete parking garage, right? They discovered it. They found it simply by paying incredibly close attention to what the images were already trying to say.
By transforming light from this harsh tool of tension into a gentle tool of reflection, the artist completely rewrote the emotional tone of these locations. In this new Cathedral series, light becomes highly symbolic, and that architectural symmetry becomes deeply spiritual. The coldness literally just melts away, and it leaves something truly reverent in its place.
And here is exactly why this matters so much for your own creative work. Similar locations can support entirely different stories. Your perspective, your personal interpretation, holds infinitely more power than the physical location itself. Seriously, you don't always need to fly to some brand new exotic destination to tell a fresh story. Sometimes you just need a new perspective on the space you're already standing in.
Let's shift gears to Section 4, AI as creative partner.
To push these expansive concepts even further, the artist actually embraced emerging technology, not to replace their vision, definitely not, but to extend their imagination during the conceptualization phase. They basically used AI as the ultimate creative sounding board. They used it to rapidly explore narrative possibilities, identify missing environmental frames that the sequence desperately needed, develop complex mood boards, test out sequencing ideas, and ultimately just refine the final presentation structures before publication. It's like having a tireless brainstorming buddy.
This quote is just a brilliant way to phrase the modern relationship between traditional artistic methods and rapidly advancing tech. AI accelerates exploration, while the photographer remains the author. That hits the nail on the head. The artist is still firmly in the driver's seat, making all the final calls and dictating the emotional resonance, but AI allows them to prototype and test those emotions at lightning speed.
Finally, Section 5, a new way of seeing.
This brings us to the ultimate storytelling milestone of this whole evolution. The true victory here isn't just taking cool photos, it's mastering comprehensive world building. It is about moving way beyond just capturing isolated, striking images, and instead building coherent visual worlds with their own distinct emotional and symbolic language. When you hit that level of cohesion, your audience doesn't just look at a picture anymore, they actually step inside your universe.
This final takeaway is the ultimate challenge for any photographer, designer, or visual artist listening right now. Every project should teach a new way of seeing. Think about that. If you aren't walking away from a creative endeavor with a slightly altered view of the world around you, well, you probably haven't dug deep enough into the atmosphere yet.
I really hope this explainer sparks your curiosity to go out there, re-examine your own surroundings, and discover a whole new creative perspective. Because I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder. If storytelling truly begins with atmosphere, how will you shift your focus to uncover the hidden, sacred narrative hiding right there in your own everyday environment? Thank you so much for walking through this artistic evolution with me today, and honestly, I cannot wait to see what worlds you build next.